My name is Joe, this is PC Island, and in this video, we'll explore Dell's cheapest PC configuration with the RX 7400. Similar to AMD's RX 6400, I believe the RX 7400 has a place in the world. The RX 7400 is a substantial upgrade over its predecessor, offering more compute power, higher memory capacity, newer architecture, and all while consuming only 2 more watts of power as compared to the 6400. Before we go over the benchmarks and my thoughts, let's talk about the hardware we're testing. The RX 7400 is definitely low-end hardware, so I wanted to find out what it was like to game in its cheapest configuration at Dell, considering it's the only place you can get it. I don't know what I was expecting, but I was definitely disappointed. Starting out with a base price of $929, the Dell Pro Tower included a Core Ultra 235. Changing it to an i3-14100 subtracted $85 from our build. Next, we traded the single 16GB DDR5 5600 megatransfer RAM for a single 8GB stick of 4800 megatransfer per second RAM, discounting the build a further $95. I would have chosen the 8GB 5600, but Dell refused to allow it with a change in processor. We already have the cheapest storage option available, a 256GB SSD. I assume I can add another one of my own, but I plan on using an external SSD loaded with games, so that's not really anything to be concerned about. Finally, we come to the graphics card choice. I knew I was going to regret this. Adding the RX 7400 cost $550. Now I know you probably have as much to say about it as I do, but let's save that for later. Adding the GPU means we need a larger power supply, which makes sense, plus $26 for a chassis with 360 watts of power. We're going to subtract $33 because we don't need a keyboard, and that's it. There weren't any other decisions to make that were either required or would decrease the price. So here we have the Dell Pro Tower with an Intel 14100, 8GB of 4800 megatransfer per second DDR5 RAM, RX 7400, 256GB SSD, and our complimentary no keyboard discount of $33. Add to cart, and our total cost is $1,337.82 after taxes. Dell was kind enough to provide us with free shipping despite being on an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. I'm sure that those of you well ingrained in PC hardware want to stop watching the video faster than a segue to LTT sponsors, but let's go over some benchmarks. First, the games that were unplayable, all of which lacked the required minimum amount of memory. Monster Hunter Wilds has a notorious reputation on PC, and this setup didn't help. High, medium, or low settings, FPS fluctuated wildly. Averages ranged between 30 and 43, but dips into single digits made every setting unplayable. Marvel Rivals' performance was poor. High settings averaged 35 FPS, medium 41, and low 50, but frequent dips made this competitive game unplayable. Horizon Zero Dawn at high settings averaged 45 FPS with dips as low as 2, medium 56 as low as 7, and low didn't improve anything. Myth Wukong at high averaged 33 FPS minimum 1, medium 46 FPS minimum 1, and low 59 FPS minimum 2. Low settings did improve overall gameplay by a large amount, but the infrequent and large dips in frame rate will have you quitting before you can finish the prologue. Rounding up the unplayable games, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora was completely unplayable at high and medium settings. Low settings brought with it a better experience, but was still unplayable. 36 FPS average and 28 FPS minimum was the best we could get here. Now, the games that were playable. Cyberpunk 2077 averaged 65 FPS with a minimum of 55. This game has come a long way since its version 1.0 and easily passes at high settings. No need for further testing. The pricing for this GPU may be stuck in the days of COVID, but this game is not. We didn't meet the memory requirements for Dirt 5. But running the benchmark on high settings yielded an average FPS of 52 and minimum of 20. Despite what seems like a bad minimum FPS, the game looked completely playable. Dropping down to medium settings gave what appeared to be a locked 60 FPS experience, averaging 59 with a minimum of 52. There was no perceivable loss in fidelity, and it appeared to play flawlessly. Total War Warhammer 3 felt playable in high settings with an average FPS of 41 and minimum of 33. Going down to medium settings resulted in a smoother gameplay experience with an average FPS of 62 and minimum of 54. This says a lot more about the CPU than it does the GPU. 4 cores was definitely working overtime, but still managed the W. Shadow of the Tomb Raider had the occasional frame dip, but was absolutely playable in high settings. Average FPS 57, minimum of 41. This game is a little on the older side at this point, but still looks stunning, and I wouldn't lower the settings any further. Guardians of the Galaxy averaged 90 FPS and dipped down to 20. However, it's important to note that the dips appear in the same spots even on higher-end hardware. The second pass at medium settings looked better and smoother, but resulted in worse on-paper benchmarks. Average FPS fell to 64, while the minimum rose to 25. Low settings increases the average by 1, bringing it up to 65 FPS, and increases the minimum to 33. However, the stuttering and dips looked worse than at medium. Overall, I would consider this game playable at medium settings. Results for Doom the Dark Ages were surprisingly playable at high settings, even if I wouldn't recommend it. There was visible stuttering with the occasional drop down to less than 1 FPS and an average of 38. Dropping down to medium settings makes this game completely playable, averaging 56 with a minimum of 33. Doom has ray tracing that you can't turn off. Being able to run this game at all is a huge win. Call of Duty Black Ops 6, high settings, was completely unplayable, averaging 27 FPS, minimum 1. A second pass at medium settings made a huge difference and is passable, but not recommended. Average 35 and minimum of 24. Low settings didn't change the average or minimum, but did completely eliminate any dips that might impact your ability to play this game in a competitive manner. This is definitely an esports title and has a setting labeled basic for low-end hardware. Not needing to go that low is a win in my book. Out of 12 games tested, 5 were unplayable. Only 4 met the minimum required specs, and 3D Mark straight up did not finish. Crashed, froze, blue screened. I tried multiple times and got nowhere. Given the hardware, I'd say that the results are an overall win for the system. A lot of these games are not easy to run. However, once you bring price into the equation, things change dramatically. If we assume the GPU were to retail for $200, less than the price of some RX 6400, this entire PC would be built for around $650, which coincidentally is how much you'd save on your car insurance if you switched to Geico. If we bought the parts and paid Best Buy the $200 they use as a build fee, we would have similar or better performance than other pre-builds Best Buy sells around the same price. However, there is one pre-built for $850 that has a Ryzen 8700F, 16GB of DDR5 RAM, RX 7600, 1TB SSD, and by comparison, makes the Dell Pro Tower look like an experiment from a Toasty Bros video. When you look at the actual $1,300 price tag, it falls apart completely. For the same money, you can get pre-builts with 16 to 32GB of RAM, better CPUs, more storage, and 8GB 5060 Ti's or 9060s. I even found a pre-built under budget with a 9700X. $550 is 5070 money. Pair that with a 9600X, 32GB of DDR5 RAM, 2TB SSD, 240mm AIO, and a fully modular 750W PSU, and you still come out under budget. It's overpriced, underpowered, and straight up embarrassing when you compare it to literally anything else at $1,300. This isn't a budget gaming PC, and I know Dell didn't market it as one, but it completely misses the mark at its price range. The RX 7400 has its place. I just don't think it's inside of a Dell. If you made it to the end of the video and you found it helpful, leave a like and a comment with your thoughts. I will be testing this card inside of a computer that makes a little bit more sense, so click that follow button to see what happens. Again, my name is Joe from PC Island. We'll see you in the next one.